Hello and welcome to Insight Live, the IT Experts Take, where we give you the opinion of experts on the technologies that can accelerate your business. Today's topic is one that we've been really excited about, and probably you as well. ChatGPT, AI ethics and business impact, plus a whole lot more. And I've got some folks that, man, we're going to have some fun today. We've got Ryan Raskop, who's a senior business development manager in AI. And we've got Carm Taglienti, who is a distinguished engineer and portfolio director here with me at Insight. And I'm Jason Rader, your host and Insight's chief information security officer. Whew, got through that. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
This will be a fun one.
It sure will. I hope we can remember all the stuff that we just talked about in the green room before we came out. So, because we've been having a good time with this. So for the uninitiated, what is ChatGPT? Tell me what this thing is.
So I guess I'll go first. And it's a little bit complex, I think, to understand. But in general, what it is it's nothing more than an algorithmic approach to being able to consume a lot of information and then provide a chat-like interface to be able to respond to the questions or queries against the model that's been trained. Against this corpus of information is basically all available information from the internet and from other sources, social media, etc. That was created by OpenAI, which allows you to be able to then ask, like I said, general questions from it using English language, which is sort of an impressive feat in and of itself. But I guess in the general sense, we would think of it as nothing more than, not belittling its capability at all, but nothing more as sort of a machine trained model that allows you to be able to ask questions in the grand scheme of things.
And so I think that was a very good answer, but what makes it special? Why all of a sudden since November 30th has this thing become so important or so special or so controversial?
Yeah, I don't know, Ryan, if you want to go ahead or you want me to sort of chime in on that. But
yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think what makes it most special for me, at least, and from those that I've talked to, is the fact that I think it's as close as we've gotten or seen in a very, media forward position of a chatbot interacting and mimicking human responses to questions and queries that we're able to provide for it. So, I mean, I think it's a very exciting tool. I mean, it's all over TV, it's all over radio. I'm hearing about it on a daily basis from family and friends, right? But for me, like the fact that I can utilize this to ask questions, to create content, to dive deeper into topics that I may be interested in, and not get the standard set of responses that 9 out of 10 are going to be incorrect. It's actually going to use actual data on the back end to formulate something based on my inputs and my re-inputs to give me something that is tailored to what I'm actually trying to go after. So it's very exciting technology in the grand scheme of things in the world of AI. And I think, we're just really scratching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to it. And I think that's why it's got a ton of media and attention from the public, is because this is, to me, like the dawn of a new age. I mean, for lack of a better words, in IT and what we're able to do, where we're able to gather information from, and how it will change our daily lives.
Yeah. And when your mom calls you and asks you about something like this, it's definitely hit mainstream. And that's literally, I think, happened to all of us. So it's funny. I always think of that statement that whenever the technology gets to a certain advanced level, it looks like magic. And I think this does appear as magic to, people can't believe the type of stuff that it comes out. I mean, it's more than just asking questions like, what's the capital of whatever? It's like, I saw one that was write a song in the style of Nick Cave. And it did. And then they showed it to Nick Cave. And of course, he didn't think it was great. But the point is, it can do that kind of stuff. It can write code. It can, do those kinds of things, which brings up, of course, the things we're going to talk about, the ethics and the legalities and copyright and all of these things associated with it.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating when you think about it. To that point, it's, there have been many advances in natural language processing. And Ryan was talking about understanding content or the semantics of what it is that you're asking, or of language itself. And so the linguistics part of it, I think, is, there's been lots of evolutionary strategies associated with that. and over time. But now if you marry that up against sort of a reinforcement learning model or a very well-trained, call it a deep learning model, now you have the ability to be able to, with a high degree of confidence, not exact, of course, because we've seen, you know, the songwriting example, Jason, you gave is probably a good one. And there have been errors that we've seen as well. But in the general sense, we can see with, you know, high degree of precision, it's able to understand the essence of what it is you're asking and then match that up to a sort of a creative answer, which is not just a regurgitation of a website, but more of a, how can I respond in sort of a semantic understanding way, which is kind of cool because now all of a sudden it's sort of the, you know, again, you could break this down if you're really into natural language processing into, well, how would I respond to that? And then you would take the behavioral characteristics of it, or in the style of a particular songwriter, for example, then you would say, well, what does that mean? That means in this form, use these words, whatever, patterns. But that is a crazy kind of, when you think about it, how many models or how many patterns are behind this? And I think that's the impressive part, just because of the flexibility and how much information really went into creating this sort of responsive, I'll call it intelligence. And I'll use that word carefully. This is not Skynet, right? Not yet.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because, you know, this didn't happen on its own. There was some human training involved in this. Does anybody want to go into what human training means in a situation like this?
Carm, I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah. So again, and I don't know the details because the details haven't really been shared in the grand scheme. But normally, what happens is when you train a model, we typically, there are two different kinds. You can do supervised or unsupervised learning generally. So in this particular case, it's more supervised. So it's sort of, if you train the model to be able to say, okay, I want you to perform a certain activity, you can train it with, this is a positive result of that activity. This is a negative result of the activity. And the machine learns from that. And then over time, reinforcement learning has to do with, okay, well, now if, you know, I gave an answer to Jason and he said, well, that song isn't like what I expected, that's garbage. Well, then the machine learns. So you're basically providing this reinforcement over time so that it's sort of the natural behavior. My guess or my assessment is, as a matter of fact, is probably that there was a lot of this sort of reinforcement learning model being done in terms of outcome. But also, we are all guinea pigs right now because we are helping to train that machine. So it's basically, you know, as we go through the process, we're sort of looking at it and saying, you know, how are they monitoring? Like, for example, they don't necessarily collect feedback, which I'm a little bit surprised at. So, you know, every once in a while, I'm sure it'd be cool if it popped up and said, was that what you were expecting? Which would really help. But I think in general, there's still that degree of training that still needs to happen in order to align. But, you know, we'll see how this goes. But that's how I would do it if I were doing it. And I think that's what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, and to your point, Carm, I mean, we are the guinea pigs for this, right? If you can even get into it right now because it has become so popular. I mean, I liken it to the old CAPTCHA kind of situation, yeah. Right? We are guinea pigs telling machines what these pictures are, right? And that's part of the whole machine learning model process there. But in this case, you know, it's such a different experience for me personally, because it's almost like it senses meaning to an extent. Like it actually understands what my intent is by asking it these questions and other people asking it questions. So it is reinforcing that learning. If I come back and say, no, that's not what I was looking for X, it's going to go back and reinforce that model, right? To basically go, okay, if somebody asks a similar question to what Ryan Raskop or is after specific information that I'm after, and Ryan Raskop is telling me that that's not what he's looking for, you know, what is the probability or where do we get to the point where the same, you know, a different person is asking the same question and wants a similar result. So I think it's a little bit of column A and column B. We're not just doing simple human supervised machine learning in all cases with AI models, right? I think in this case, it is actually building to the point of, obviously, you're still going to want to have humans to supervise it based on all the ethical challenges that we'll discuss. But it's building that kind of deep neural network that's able to make these decisions on its own and understand feedback from a perspective of, okay, I've had enough people tell me that what I stated to them was not necessarily what they were looking for. So I need to find additional avenues to get to what they're actually meaning in this case.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I read about it is just like people, it remembers the question that you asked previously. So therefore, just like, oh, I see what you're asking now, and it helps it kind of. So again, I love it. I'm a big gamer as well, and I love how we've kind of emulated the physics of game. It's basically everything that happens in real life we can do with a physics engine and those kinds of things. We're getting to that point where like, oh yeah, if we can take the questions that have been asked previously and apply those to the responses that we get back. I mean, we're getting to that point where we can programmatically do those things with having the processing power to do that and the trained models to do that. So it's pretty exciting.
Right. Yeah, which is interesting. And I know we're going to get to the ethical side of this, but I think over time, if you certain types of questions that you might ask, for example, you can create a profile for someone, right? So if Carm asks these kinds of questions, typically, then you might get a pretty good feel for what's my line of work, what's my political affiliation, et cetera, et cetera. Because I think over time, these will start to become, and we've seen this as well, and it's pretty popular now. And if you read, articles about ChatGPT, et cetera, but websites will ultimately become this. Google's kind of freaking out a little bit, saying, well, we have to get there quick. And they've made announcements to create sort of a ChatGPT-like interface for Google. Microsoft's made investments, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the kinds of things where it's like, we have to be careful, not we personally, but how are our own, well, yeah, I guess we do. But how do we protect our own personal information because of the fact that it's, now all of a sudden you've got a really smart engine behind the scenes, really just trying to understand how to serve you better. But in essence, it can also be used for, potentially unwanted uses. I won't say nefarious, but certainly unwanted uses.
Possibly nefarious. I think that kind of goes to the question, Matt, thanks for the question. And it's, what are some of areas of concern or, a reframing with tech like ChatGPT? We've all talked about this in previous prep sessions. So what are you guys concerned about?
Well, I mean, I think from a high level on the ethical standpoint of generative AI models like ChatGPT, I mean, there's a plethora of concerns, for the lack of a better word. From my perspective, what I kind of think in this space is things like bias and misinformation, right? I think we're inundated with this on a daily basis on social media platforms, on the internet, on TV, on whatever you look at, right? But there is definitely a concern of, and I won't say nefarious either, but additional actors out there acting in order to create a certain viewpoint or basically influence people to believe those types of things. I think another one, obviously, that comes to mind is, the discriminatory type of ethical challenge that we could have with that as well, right? Same thing with the bias and the misinformation, right? If we've got one of these ChatGPT models, I use like a mortgage approval type of instance for reference there, right? And if it can gather basically my profile information, right? And for some reason, men aged over 40 that have bald heads aren't as likely to live out the length of their mortgage or pay their mortgage on time. Can it do things to, maybe reduce my chances of getting a mortgage decision in those types of situations? And then I think there's always the old taking human jobs ethical concern around it. We're not talking about, replacing humans in general with these types of models. There's always got to be a human in the loop, as we all know. But from my perspective, I think those are the top three, at least, that I'm hearing from my, time out in the field and from my friends and family members, is what is this going to do? Is it going to create additional problems for us in spite of all the benefits that it's going to provide for us? And how do we handle those issues?
Yeah, and I'll put on the hat of, just to add to that, those are all great points. Being an adjunct professor, so I teach, and I'm going to go down the path of, well, can it write my paper for me? Can it answer my questions for me? And in some ways, I mean, I think while it can be used as a tool for learning, which is sort of the positive intent, can also be used to write your paper for you. So in terms of, if you think about intellectual integrity or academic integrity, you can violate that. And so it really is, in some ways, potentially not used in ethical ways in order to, say, legitimize a degree for a student or a doctoral thesis or whatever it might be. So I think there's some mechanisms that we have to use in order to, I don't want to say constrain, because I really hate to use that word, because that's where I was going. I was hesitating, saying things like this, I think, while can be used for great good, if we swing too far around the constraints, or we put in too many regulations in place, then they sort of defeat the purpose. So I think there's a good middle ground there somewhere. But it'll be really fascinating to see what'll happen over the course of time on all of these points, because I think it becomes something of, whether it's profiling, whether it's a sharing of information, whether it's inference about, behavior, how you may vote, how you may act, etc. Those are all the things that I think we're sort of opening a new era of, PII or even PHI, and how to protect that information because of what we share.
Yeah, totally. And I think you bring up an interesting point. This has been out since November 30th, this iteration. And already, in New York City, they have banned the use of it in the public school system. So, and we were talking about that earlier, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I mean, I don't believe that denying people access to this in general is a good thing. I do think you've got to put additional controls in. And there's also an ethical question on the OpenAI side, as well as the user's side. As I always say you can't put in enough controls from a security guy's perspective. We can't expect that all of the security is going to be provided by the tech. It's got to be provided by the individuals using it as well. And so that's one of those things that you can't take people out of the mix in order to deal with this situation.
Right.
So we have another question. Can I use ChatGPT to help me do research faster for the paper I have to write for school or for college or university? Which I say yes. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I would say yeah as well. But there are some challenges here, and I was going to bring this point up. So Matt, thanks for asking that. The one thing that I've noticed, so ChatGPT doesn't provide you where it may derive some of its sources, and so you may get an answer, and clearly it's not a thinking entity, so it's deriving its input from someplace. So understanding where it got it would be really interesting. And if you're going to write a research paper, then citations are a critical part of it. But the second part, I think, that's also really important as we think about it is to use it for identifying what those citations might be or where the information is coming from is super helpful, because doing my doctoral thesis, just as an example, I can't tell you how many articles I had to read and how much research I had to do. And this could make just sort of helping to create a focus around, these are the areas you should be contemplating. These are the more relevant sources that might be available to you, et cetera. And that can actually then get you to the best part of what you're trying to do, which is learn more, extend the research. So I think it's really valuable in that context. But it's, those are really kind of the counterpoints of how you use it. But if you use it to write your thesis, then that's a bad thing. It's not your unique content. You really haven't learned anything as you go through the process. And I think we also have to be careful. Well, or OpenAI or whoever produces these products is it's written the GDPR. I think it's also written in CCPA. You have to, if you provide a decision or you come up with an output, if you will, for a machine learning algorithm, you have to identify why you made that decision or why the decision was made if called upon. So that might be an area that might be called into question at some point in the future.
Yeah, and Carmen, you make a great point. I mean, we discussed this a little bit on the pre-call, right? I had read an article yesterday where, it referenced a professor that was basically saying, in order to pass this course on your essays and your theses, you will need to use generative AI models to accomplish that. However, what I'm going to expect you to do, and to your point where there may not be citations, is provide backed up data and citations based on information you've been able to go out there and discover based on what the AI model has provided to you. So I think it almost gives you more of an outline than actually utilizing it as a paper writer to kind of give you avenues and different thought processes about what topics you should focus on, and then you go out and do the research to ensure that the information that you're getting is correct. offering you more understanding of the topics that you're trying to expound on, and present that in your own specific way back in your theses or your papers and those types of things of your thoughts on the topic, that may have guided you a little bit based on the OpenAI or the AI models, right? But it is your own thoughts. It's your IP. It is what's going on in your brain in relation to what this is providing you. We used to have to go back through encyclopedias or the internet search back in the day to write papers. If you didn't have all the research, you'd be sitting in the library, right? I think at least this way now, it offers a great opportunity for us to get that information quicker, to start to connect those dots a little bit easier, go do the research ourselves, and then come to the forefront with what our opinions are on the topic and what we truly believe to be true based on what these models are providing for us.
Right. And that's better, in my opinion, anyway. I mean,
yeah.
So another question, Sakina, thanks for asking the question. She says, basically, to summarize, aren't there tools out there that can detect this type? If I were going to submit a ChatGPT written paper, there are tools already out there that can detect with pretty good accuracy whether or not it was AI generated or not.
Yeah, I think that well, it's an interesting question because there were two things that one thing I mentioned earlier, which was sort of this reinforcement learning model. So in when I was talking about compliance, it really, or ensuring that at least you can say, how was my answer derived, which is really part of these compliance models. That's a deterministic strategy, right? So it basically said, if you give me these inputs, I will generate these outputs. You can detect that pretty easily, right? So if I wanted to, was this generated from ChatGPT? Well, I don't know. I can ask the question and see if the output matches. Sure. But if it's truly a learning model, then you would say, kind of like a human, because I never answer the same question twice the same way. It would be sort of a new perspectives, new learning, new semantical analysis. Potentially, it would be more difficult depending on how robust the algorithms really are, which would be interesting. But yeah, I think today, though, again, I'm not belittling its capability at all. It's probably more deterministic today. So like it saves your questions. If you ask the same question again, I didn't check this, but we probably should. I would assume it would give you the same answer again, which should be detectable. But it's a really good question. I'm going to try that if I can ever get in. I can't seem to get in anymore.
That's a good point. So from Nandan, we've got people are panicking over the possible replacement of human tech work, like manual testing, etc., by ChatGPT. Can we expect this in the future? I know we all have opinions on this. Anybody want to start?
Yeah, go for it, Ryan. I'll jump in.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question there. I had another noise in my headset there, or in my microphone.
So the question is there people are concerned about technology like this replacing workers, sure. For example, human tech work like manual testing, etc. Do we expect this to happen?
I mean, I think in some cases you could expect it to happen, right? I think it's more about, readjusting the tasks and output of what we expect out of the human worker. I think what you're going to find in these cases, I'll use like a customer service type of example. I know you reference tech, but same kind of thing. Like this isn't necessarily made to replace that as an overall sweeping reform of a customer service engagement or kind of business, right? What it's meant to do, I think, at least I personally believe, is kind of take some of the tedium out of there, right? So say you have tons of customer service requests coming in. Simple ones obviously don't need a ton of human interaction. Where's my order? Can I replace this order? Can I return this order? What if I want a different product that, could you recommend me something in those cases? I think, those are the cases where this is going to actually thrive, and in the tech world as well. I don't think from a perspective of replacing humans are still going to have to be in the loop to help guide along those not so simple issues, right? We may get to the point where it's a step-by-step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got these 5 problems, and AI can eventually solve for those. But I think in a lot of cases where it's an extreme customer satisfaction issue or it's an extreme problem, there still has to be a human in the loop there to kind of solve those problems. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of teed off customers that are getting nothing but order tracking responses from an AI bot. I think that a lot of people are concerned about that. But I'll just say this in addition to that. I don't think it's about replacing humans. I think it's about augmenting our skill sets. So there may be a component of tech jobs in the future where you will need to utilize these types of tools in your own job. So you're going to have to learn new skill sets to be able to support these types of models in the future. Obviously, there's going to need to be people to monitor and make sure that nothing illegal or potentially biased or discriminatory is going on in the process. But just actually managing the back end of it. I don't think that anytime in the near future, in my opinion, we're going to get to a point where humans aren't involved. So I do understand the fear about that, because nobody wants to lose their job. But I think it actually will be just more of a shift in skill set, and allow humans to actually concentrate on the bigger problems at hand, rather than the tedium and the day-to-day stuff that can be handled by something like a AI, generative model.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and I think that's the right perspective to take, because it certainly isn't about replacing jobs. It's about ensuring consistency. It's about making sure that as we innovate, we can focus on doing things that for the betterment of society, or to make things more productive for us, or allow us to be able to learn more advanced concepts. Those are the kinds of things I think that we really need to think about. But clearly, and this is true of any sort of innovative or any automation that occurs over time. Like, I remember when robotics was first put on the scene, people were like going crazy. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm not going to have a job anymore. And auto manufacturing is going to go down the tubes." But we evolve, and we take on other types of job functions, but leverage the consistency that is provided and efficiencies that are provided by some of this innovation. But I think it's also the part of what is the human element of what it really means. And like you said, making sure, and I love the term fit for purpose, use it for the right reasons. I mean, the intent is not to replace human intelligence. It's meant to provide consistency where it's necessary, to provide redundancy where tasks that maybe fatigue a human, or other kinds of things that machines are much better at. And I'll go back to my earlier reference. It's like, it took me years to get through, thousands, or well, maybe not thousands. I probably researched thousands of articles, but it's there's no way I would be able to, it could be done so much faster by something like a ChatGPT, for example, if we point that at a corpus of documents. So it's like, is it really worth it to, does that really provide a lot of value to me? Yes and no. I mean, it just feels like a lot of arduous work in the general sense.
Great point. And I agree 1,000%. There are things that we want the AI to assist the humans, right? We don't want AI to take the place of the humans. And I was also thinking, we've gotten to this point of ChatGPT. It's not solving world hunger or anything right now. It's how much development would it take to get it to be where it can actually replace, a wide array of jobs is probably unlikely to happen in the short term. So stay in school, kids. But it's it's one of those things where AI is not going to replace you at your job. People who know how to use AI are going to replace you at your job, and you got to figure out that angle, which is basically a summary of what you said, Brian. So Brian's got a question here. Answer isn't exactly the same unless it's a concrete answer, like who is the band Metallica. But if you ask it to write a song like Metallica, it'll be different. So what I think Brian's trying to say is there's some easy answers to get, and then there's some answers that'll be hard to. I wonder if, depending on the system, whether it'll generate the same Metallica song each time. Do you see what I'm saying? If we told it to generate one, and that would, maybe this kind of correlates back to the question of if we were trying to check to see if somebody wrote my paper. Because again, as the system learns, it's not going to write the same paper or the same song, I assume, after it's already been asked some questions related to that. So again, it's a really interesting angle. I mean, so one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up, and I know we're going long today, so sit tight, everybody. From an ethics perspective, ChatGPT's got some rails on it. It's, we don't want it to be used for those nefarious things that we keep, literal nefarious things. So there's some rails on this thing. Although, there are some things to be said as well about, I think the term's called hallucinations, where it actually gives incorrect answers to very specific things like who was the band Metallica. Any comments on those?
So my thought on that is when we think about the usage of some of these models or why they're created, like for example, ChatGPT, at least initially, is created to answer questions. The questions are certainly within a sphere of types of questions. If you start to think about special purpose style questions, like a songwriting model or a songwriting capability, or even artistic, create art or other kinds of things that are probably models in and of themselves, then it's very difficult for ChatGPT, for example, that is really more targeted at answering your questions and understanding the semantics of what you're asking to be able to respond to that, unless it's trained. So I think over time, and again, I wish I was, more into this kind of thing myself, but it's like I can imagine sort of distributed model capabilities and collaboration. So sort of a ChatGPT for art, a ChatGPT for, for songs, and then collaboration, which would basically be like, you ask a question of ChatGPT and it's like, oh, I don't know. Let me go ask the songwriting model. And it understands the genre, it understands the band, it understands the members and whatever. And that high fidelity model can actually provide the results, which are the song, which is probably more like what you're going to get than something out of ChatGPT.
Yeah, certainly trained. And I've seen it in game development. I've seen some demos where they have the assets already in a catalog and he's like, generate a background that's mountainous with palm trees or something like that. And that thing just does it. And it's pretty impressive. And again, that's not taking the place of game developers. It's getting the tedium out of that, because I'd rather have something to start with and edit from there. But I don't think, or at least we haven't arrived at the spot where game devs aren't required because there's still a story that's got to be written, although we're kind of getting there. But interesting. Let's see. Stephanie, is there a future where tools like ChatGPT actually take action on IT issues? I like this question. One thing that comes to mind is security, where current tools can contain threats, but ultimately a human still has to take action. Love the question. And as a cybersecurity guy, I would say 1000%. So that's when I said human assisted tech, I really am talking about things like cybersecurity and those things, whereas these, and there's AI is put into a lot of security. People are putting that moniker at the end of their security tool name these days. Everything has AI. We joked about that earlier. But that AI doesn't talk to the AI of the other system, doesn't talk to the AI of the other system. So just because AI is in one product doesn't mean that AI, the questions or answers that one has feed into the other. And I think that's where a tool like this could make that environment so much stronger. But again, that's where open protocols and open source things allow those things to crosstalk and share a common language and format. And then we'll get there, because there is no Google car, I always say, for security or, self-driving car. But I think there will be sooner or later, at least for those, kind of tier 1, tier 2 things. Would you guys agree?
And I definitely think there is a use case for that as well. I think, it wouldn't be responsible to have these systems take action on behalf of a business or an individual based on the information of the collaboration with all these tools and things. So there is still that human involvement there. But I think from a security focus, obviously cybersecurity, Jason, you know this better than anybody, is a huge focus for many organizations and us in our personal data as well, right? Just ensuring that none of us get hit with ransomware or have our information leaked or our bank account stolen, those types of things. I think that the potential for it is great to be able to actually, have some predictive analytics based on other metrics that are coming in through these tools, bounce it off of other similar tools and programs that can help kind of isolate that problem, and then have a human in the loop there to help reinforce, okay, is this what actually is happening? And how do we move forward on it? I feel like I don't think we're at the point yet where we can allow the machine to make that decision unless it's very simple things that aren't, let's say, going to take down a data center if it makes a decision, right? But it is very, very interesting to me where, I've seen SDKs around security in the AI space and other things where I think it's a very large focus, because data privacy, security, governance are all very big topics of the day, right? We see it on a day in, day out basis. This could potentially help us to isolate some of those and these models could learn from each other on, what does that mean for your model? What does it mean for my model? And how do we develop a plan of attack based on that information?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add there is, and I've thought about this quite a bit because of there are so many vulnerability databases, there are so many types of issues that occur, breaches, whatever, and this, Jason, it's so hard to keep up with it. So there are probably, even from a security perspective, like, you write policies for Insight. There's policies that we create. We set up a certain profile for authorization and authentication. So it's like those can be learned behaviors, and then you could say within reason, things that fall within the realm of these types of activities. Then yes, the machine can make a decision for us. But other things, then you would say these are probably things I need to get involved, etc. But yeah, I think that world is, if it's not here already, it's pretty quickly on the horizon.
No, I think it would be brilliant to literally have it parse the company's policies and procedures and then compare the data that it's seeing from network activity and human activity to those. I mean, that would be phenomenal. I foresee something like this. So Marcus had asked a question about ethics, and I think it's an interesting one. And just to summarize, basically, are we going to turn AI over into making ethical choices for our organization? Because literally, that's what you do with every single employee that you have within your organization, and not all of them are trained to the level that you want them to be. So, any comments related about that, or like you had already said, is there a line that we draw where nope, we got to have humans to do that, at least at this point?
Well, I think from my perspective, what is ethical? To me, it could be one thing. To you, it could be another thing, right? So I think
that's another.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think at this point, could it be trained to make those decisions? Yes. Would it have the same accuracy as humans in making those decisions? Yes, is my second yes answer there. Because I think you'd end up in the same boat. I think there is ways around that for organizations, right? I think if you develop a team of people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions, etc., different job titles, genders, and beyond, as kind of the humans involved in the process, I think you can get much more ethical than just having one entity making that decision for all. But I think if you were to train the model based on that data from people and humans of all different backgrounds, you would get a much closer answer, right? We're all going to make different decisions based on what we truly believe in beyond. As you said, humans sometimes don't make those decisions. We all working for organizations have to go through ethics compliance every year, and could you base models based on that? Potentially, but how are you going to stop a human from putting their foot in their mouth and employing it in a way that doesn't resonate with what you're trying to provide?
Yeah, and I do think we have the ability to start driving more toward a consistent approach, especially as it relates to ethics and the application of ethical principles, because of the fact that when we talk about what was the rationale for making a decision, whether or not the decision is actually enforced is a little bit different. I think, automatic decisions we want to stay away from those, maybe, especially as it relates to things like employment, etc.
Yeah.
But using the machine to identify, like, does it adhere to the rules or the policies that I would have created, like your security example, Jason, I think is a good one, because I think we can start to move more toward consistent and equitable approaches.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's all about, because like you said, it's like, I sometimes question myself. I make a decision and it's like, how much does bias come into it? My own feelings, where I'm not really using I'll call it a regimented approach. But the machine, quote unquote, will at least allow us to see, well, what does that look like? Like, do I adhere to the sort of the basic principles that are associated with what is an ethical approach to a decision within my organization, or maybe even my own personal framework of ethical behavior? Those I think would be really important. It's like, am I contradicting myself or not, etc. So yeah.
Oh, loads and loads of fun we could have with this. Now, I wanted to kind of close. Well, hold on. Let's see what we got a question here. Oh, we got a couple. Everybody, thank you so much for your questions. You guys rock. It's making it fun.
Awesome.
So Microsoft has invested billions of dollars into OpenAI. We know that, and development because they see the potential for AI to drive significant advancements across a wide range of industries and applications. Yes, it allows others to freely access and develop upon the AI models and algorithms. Sorry, my monitor's in a weird spot. Created by Microsoft, which helps to accelerate innovation and improve the quality of AI systems. By investing in OpenAI, Microsoft is also positioning itself as the leader in this field. And I assume the rest of that is, kind of Microsoft definitely has made a significant investment at the right time. They were involved before the significant investment, by the way. They helped generate some of this model. This was done on the Azure platform, if I'm correct. So yeah, it just happens to be right place, right time, everything lining up. But I definitely think it was a super good idea for Microsoft to get involved in this. The openness of OpenAI, that's a question, maybe an ethical question, but it's a question that, I think they estimated that OpenAI was worth $49 billion since November 30th. So that's a gigantic, there's money there for sure. So that changes the ethical question as well.
Right. I would say just quickly with respect to that, I think it's leader. If we define leader as first mover advantage, then yes, absolutely. So if they're helping to facilitate the practical application of this across the enterprise and address some of the issues that we've been talking about, then yeah, that is in some ways, how you become the leader in the space. I mean, in terms of thought leadership, clearly making investments are a way to do that. But I think in the general sense, we would measure success as practical application and impact on society. So, or corporations. So yeah, I would say it's a smart move from Microsoft's perspective, but we know Google's releasing their version of this in the next several months. So I'm not 100% sure that, it's going to be, they're declared the market leader necessarily. And again, hopefully, nobody feels badly about my commenting this way, but in general, I think it's more about usage, practical application, in addressing a lot of the issues that we've been talking about today, because then it becomes more realistic to, I think, for the consuming public, not just a cool idea or something that can, tell me whether or not I should bet on a certain, whatever sports game.
Good stuff. So interesting question here. So if ChatGPT is kind of trained, basically the essence of this is if it answers something and we tell it it's wrong, and then it answers the next time and it was in fact right. How have we changed the way that it answers, and could somebody have a negative effect on the situation? And also, I guess the question is if AI can do everything and it could be wrong, it probably boils down to the point of people still know how to do, and that's what we've been saying from an educational perspective. People still need to know how to do math, but the calculator makes it faster, right? Yep. And I think that's what we kind of all feel consensus-wise about utilizing a platform like this. You don't want to hire people who only know how to hit enter on a keyboard. They need to know the business that they do and how this AI is used. Fair enough?
Yeah, agreed. And I think the one important part of all of this that I'll just mention quickly, we won't get into too much detail, but it's cross-validation. You just because you told me it was 11, it's not like a Wikipedia where I made a modification and it just, it's like, oh, well, you just changed, whether or not, 1 + 1 = 2. Carm said it was 3. So there we go. It's really this cross-validation model. And it's really part of the core principles of what AI is all about, or what machine learning is all about. And so if we're not cross-validating, then we really need to be very careful about consuming that information.
Yep. So Frederick says, if ChatGPT can write essays for our young adults in school, will schools have to adapt to removing writing? Interesting. Yeah. And I just actually thought about this earlier. It changes what writing means, I guess. Again, we kind of talked about how you ask questions is going to be affected by this technology. How you answer questions is potentially affected by this technology. Any thoughts on that?
That's a super interesting question, because when Frederick wrote the question, I was thinking, well, how do you prevent that from happening? Well, maybe it's an interview. Maybe it's I like it. you know,
presentations that you have to give on the topic.
right,
Checks
exactly.
and balances.
As opposed to a submission, because, you know, plagiarism was a big deal. We created plagiarism tools back in the day. So it's like, well, can somebody submit, you know, something from another content source? Well, we were able to overcome that one. So can we do the same thing for something that's AI generated? Probably, possibly. So where does that take us then? Does it mean that then I have to check all the time? And maybe that is the answer. So writing doesn't go away, but it's more, we have better detection mechanisms to know that it did come from a unique source, the individual, or we use other modalities, like I said, in-person discussions, interviews, whatever, something like that. Record me, and then I can detect whether or not you're a bot or not, because now all of a sudden we'll have video personas that are able to, you know, here we go. So you get the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liken it to a use case that I could potentially use this for, right? I absolutely do not like creating PowerPoint presentations, right? But if it could create imagery based on data that I provide and bullet points and topics and those things based on what I give it for data, right? I still have to present on that. So if I don't know that topic, I'm still going to get found out. Right. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it, is to have some sort of checks and balances in place where, okay, I hate to say it, but prove it. Prove that you understand this. I don't think, other than if there is any sort of ways, you know, potentially in the future of watermarking or digital signatures or something like that that are able to be used to kind of mar your writing in the future because you just copy paste it or whatever. You know, it may be something that we could, that they are looking at for a, you know, compliance issue and ensuring that people are using this to their best intentions and not just to cheat on my essay that I have to write for next week. But I think, you know, there will be ways, but currently I truly believe it's the prove it kind of strategy on that. You wrote this, please tell me all about it and summarize it and tell me your thoughts without reading your own documentation, right? About where you got this information and how you develop these thoughts and your writing style.
Change the way we learn, or the way that we show we've learned. I love it. And I think Nandan's asked a question that actually was where I was kind of heading to finish up is, you know, let's talk about the platform. What makes it so fast? The question I was going to ask specifically, we talked about Google having their platform, Microsoft's in OpenAI have a platform that they're using. Is there going to be a need for there to be businesses to have their own trained models? And what would it take for them to do that? Or will we always be maybe augmenting that locally with a plug back into the trained models that are of the bigger providers? You guys following what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. And so maybe to answer Don's question, so as I was describing earlier, you know, ChatGPT is not just one model; it's a series of models. And so basically, and if you refer to, and I actually looked this up just quickly, so I don't have all this in my brain, but it uses an API or an OpenAI GPT-3 language model, which is how they do this. But they have a series of models that they support. And basically it's that model interaction, I think, that provides the speed, which allows you to be able to say, okay, well, I know that I have natural language processing. Once I identify the semantic area, I can then go to the models that are most appropriate for answering the question, or even maybe a variety of them. And then, like in most AI systems, measure the confidence levels of the response. So it's like, okay, well, this one gave me the best response, I'm going to use this one, et cetera, or a variety based on what you might get. And that's some of the secret sauce, by the way, that would be in the middle of all this. What it runs on top of, if that's a question you're asking, I don't know specifically. Like, I don't know if these are running on GPUs that are available in Azure, or, you know, what the actual platform looks like, but it would be interesting to see that too, but I don't know offhand. I don't know, if Ryan, if you know the answer to that.
I mean, I've heard rumblings that they're running on NVIDIA GPUs in Azure, right? For that parallel processing and speed that we're getting out of that would probably make sense. But as far as the question around, will businesses be creating their own models or using something like a ChatGPT model, I think it's actually both. I think, you know, using their own data, creating their own models, and then augmenting or supplementing with some of these pre-canned models that the work's already been done, right? I kind of see this as building blocks. I think that ChatGPT is an amazing thing. It's created this amazing amount of notice in the marketplace. And I think by allowing a lot of these things to be open source and API calls and those types of things where you can build those into your own applications and your own models will allow us to just keep building on that information, and they'll continue to get better. So, I mean, we're seeing it from a perspective of businesses going out and building their own, but there are additional pre-trained models out there that are being utilized, if not only as a starting point, as an augmentation of the business's data that they're, and what they're trying to achieve with these models. So I think the answer is yes, they both will be using both. They all will be using both in the future, or, some may want to create their own IP around this and maybe create something a little bit better.
Pay for service, right?
Yep.
Create your model and charge.
I mean, and that's why organizations like ours have the investment on the AI side, on the infrastructure side, on the cloud side, on the security side, to kind of bring all of this stuff together. It's not simply making this work, is one thing, but making it work within a business environment to actually produce those results and interface with the humans that it needs to interface with is a solution that is hard to kind of tackle with a one-man team kind of thing. So I think that's why I was talking about earlier. It's going to be a while before this makes its way into making people not have jobs. It's not going to be ChatGPT came out in November and I'm fired in February. That's probably not how this is going to go down.
I just want my devices to answer me more personalized and with better responses. That's all I want.
I want my own Jervis. That's Well,
love it.
I think this has been awesome. You guys, we've had a really, really good time. And thank you guys out there for the interaction and for the questions. It's been fantastic. We're probably going to have to do this again because it was just too fun. I know we had some stuff we wanted to talk about we didn't get into, but it's a good stopping point. So gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me and having a good time. If you want to know more about what we do at Insight, please visit us at solutions.insight.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.